Okay, good morning, everybody. All right, we're going to try that one more time. Good morning, everybody. All right. So my name is Renata Simro, and I'm president and CEO of the LA84 Foundation in Los Angeles. So if I've got all this energy, I know you guys have to have all this energy because I got it at 3 o'clock this morning, LA time. And simply put, the LA84 Foundation, the legacy of the 1984 Olympic Summer Games, we transform youth lives through sport. It is certainly my pleasure to be here with you all today as we continue our Project Play solutions-based focus. Our panel this morning is focused on play number 4, revitalizing in-town leagues. It was at my local recreation center that I learned to play softball and then basketball, eventually making my high school team. I rode my bike to practice, and the games are always at a park in my neighborhood. This was the setting where kids at all skills levels and background played, rarely roaming outside of their town borders. But today, hometown leagues can be stigmatized as inferior, a casualty of travel-based, early forming teams that cater to the best skilled athletes. Reviving recreational leagues is critical to our efforts, but it depends on the quality of the offerings and the quantity of available kids. Parents with means must also be given a reason to flee for early travel teams and opt for programming options that develop their child's skills and provides an opportunity for advancement. In our region of the youth sports world, we saw barriers to limitations to expanding in-town leagues at parks and recreation centers, safe passages, budget cuts, quality programming. So what we did was we met the kids where they were. In partnership with the LA Unified School District in Los Angeles and their after-school arm Beyond the Bell, we shared and leveraged staff and financial resources, used existing school infrastructure to create a structured sports program offering 7 different sports, and we've engaged 8,000 kids who otherwise might not be participating. We provide coach mentors, skills development, and a competition element at the end of each week session. It's a fun program that's engaging kids where they are. The results have blown our mind. Participation is up. It's increased 57% since we started the program 7 years ago. Sports sampling is up with nearly 43% of the regular sports participants participating in multiple sports. Girls' participation is up, and we've done that by switching from softball to volleyball, and we've seen a 163% increase. And our kids are good. Many of our kids playing in our middle school sports program are going to play in high school, and we're tracking some 20 of our former participants who are now playing Division I sports in college. We're proud of its impact, and we believe this to be a scalable model. But you're not here to hear about me. We're here to hear from a panel of national experts to learn how others are applying play number 4 to increase sports in their region. And so my job, though, is to introduce the panel and our moderator for this morning's session, Dan Shanoff. Dan currently oversees content and programming for Monumental Sports Network. He brings to this morning's discussion 20 years of editorial expertise in digital media and social platforms. And the majority of his career has been navigating the media and the way that people consume and are consumed by it. He writes a lot about sports, but his claim to fame is really that he is the father of the Project Play Summit star last year, Gabe Shanoff. So let's welcome Gabe, who will introduce the panel and engage this morning's discussion. Dan?
Thanks, Renata. I really appreciate the introduction. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks to the Aspen Institute and Project Play Initiative for having all of us on the panel out here to talk about this really, really important issue. As Renata said, I have a very tough act to follow. My son was on the stage in this chair, actually, with Monet Davis and Allison Felix and a couple other kids last year on the Ask Kids What They Want panel. And I will attempt to live up to his model. Of course, we're creating a tough act to follow for Billie Jean King and the First Lady of the United States, so they can deal with that. A couple months ago, I was having a conversation with somebody, and they asked me, where is your happy place? And it was an instantaneous reaction, and it was being out on the court with my son and his friends coaching their rec league basketball team. Community league, open to anyone, low cost, and so I know viscerally and firsthand how important it is and how much it matters. So this particular panel topic is personally and professionally meaningful to me. So before we get started, you guys have seen this through some of the other panels. We want to know how you rate the state of play for in-town sports leagues. What grade do you give stakeholders in providing quality community-based leagues? We're going to go to as.pn/pp7. You see it on the monitors. You might need to refresh your browser. You might need to scroll down a screen or two to see our particular question, but we would love to know what grade you give. And then as I introduce, and while you vote, I'm going to introduce our panel, and we are going to hear how they grade the landscape. First up, we have Ryan Eckel. Ryan is the Vice President of Brand for Dick's Sporting Goods and Executive Producer of Keepers of the Game, in support of the Sports Matter initiative. It was just featured at the Tribeca Film Festival last month. Welcome, Ryan. Next up, we have Noah Blue Elk Hotchkiss. He's the founder of the Tribal Adaptive Organization, and he's recognized as a champion for change by the Aspen Institute Center for Native American Youth. Please welcome Noah. Next, we have Rebecca Kodysh. She directs all community initiatives for the Cleveland Indians, including the Youth Baseball Development Initiative. Welcome, Rebecca. And finally, we have Max Levitt. He's the founder and executive director of Leveling the Playing Field, recently profiled in the Washington Post for its equipment sharing program. And he's going to also be joining the panel. Welcome, Max. So the structure of the panel, we're gonna reflect on some of the developments over the past year. We're gonna share learnings from everyone's work, and then we're gonna try to elevate, as with every panel here, we're gonna try to elevate some specific ideas to help any and all stakeholders. So the goal here with Project Play is actionable insights. So that'll be our ultimate focus. For now, let's do we have the results of the poll? Oof, let's see. Sounds about right. That's probably the grade I would have given, but let's hear from each of the panelists as an opening question what grade you would give and sort of how do you assess the state of in-town sports leagues. Ryan, go ahead.
So I feel like a C is an easy grade to give because you're not saying you're doing too well and you're not doing too poorly. I gave a C. That's probably why I got a lot of C's in school as well.
Go ahead, Noah.
So I would give it a C as well, just basically because we can still be doing more, but we are doing a lot now, and so, yeah.
Okay. Not to deviate from everyone else, but the B is interesting. I think I would probably give it a B- maybe, and looking at it from a stakeholder's perspective and looking at my current role as a funder, I think that there is more that we can do. But I also think that there's some good work that's taking place currently.
I would go with the B as well. I would agree with that. I think I work a lot in low-income communities where out-of-town leagues are not a possibility financially. So I have seen a growth in awareness of a need for support to keep in-town leagues alive for the fact that without in-town leagues, low-income kids aren't playing. So I think there's a lot to do, but I think we're trending in the right direction, at least from what I've seen.
Okay, so the panel nets out maybe around a C+, slightly better than the room average, but okay, maybe we're seeing signs of being able to go up the curve a little bit. So for each of you, what have you found works, right? I think that's, as we talk about solutions, there's a lot of different models out there, some more successful than others. What have you in your particular roles found that works? And we could start. Ryan, please go ahead.
I think the biggest overarching issue with in-town leagues is there's a cultural challenge. Parents think that all their kids have the potential of getting a college scholarship or going pro, and so there's pressure to join elite teams early and travel teams early, and there's a talent drain from in-town leagues. I think so. I don't know if I've seen So my kids are young. They're 5, 3, and 1. And right now it's great. Baseball practice is 5 minutes from our house. And we hop in the car late, throwing on the hat and trying to tie his shoes. He can't even do that yet. That it works at a young age, but I think very, very quickly there's pressure to start to, to decide whether this is going to be a real thing or this is going to be a fun thing. And real thing meaning like we're gonna try and develop and keep up with the top talent in the town, and that's where the issue. So I haven't seen anything that, aside from changing culture, and what we're trying to do is let people know that there are benefits to sport that go far beyond a college scholarship, that go far beyond a chance to play professionally. And I think that by increasing awareness of that, I think that we increase participation in let's say kids who don't aspire, parents who don't necessarily want to push their kids to an elite track.
What and I want to give you at least a chance. The film was incredible. So how does that work into the mix?
Well, that's part of awareness building. We're trying to get the message out that if you participate in sports, you're 4 times more likely to go to college. You are 50% less likely to be absent from school, and so there are a lot of major benefits to participating in sports. I just don't think people are aware of in the country. I think that. We see people, customers who are having a bunch of stores who will invest significant thousands of dollars in their kids to play elite sports, and they actually they literally think of it as an investment where they're going to get a return on investment with a college scholarship, and that's just the odds. If you look at the numbers, the odds aren't great. So we're trying to show that even if you're not on that path, that there's still a lot of benefit to participating.
Rebecca, you're in such an interesting position because the team obviously represents the apex of what, a sports career, right? Like a professional athlete at the highest level of the sport. And yet there's also a huge, you obviously work in depth with the community. So how do you balance those two things, and how do you see it?
So hearing Ryan talk about awareness, I think that's something as a professional sports team that we can help with too. So getting more of our athletes to tell their personal stories and to talk about the fact that they've, played on rec leagues, or perhaps they played a multiple sports and not just the one sport. So I think we have a place there. I also think that we have some programs that we are invested in as a professional sports team in our local community, and we also have the opportunity to be a convener of other professional sports, and just sort of, take that leadership role of this is important to us and these are some of the things that we're doing. So to be able to do that as well. So for example, we have a new program that we started a couple years ago. It's called Fields for the Future, and it sort of aligns with one of the other strategies, Think Small. We are renovating baseball fields, but in our region in Northeast Ohio, it's important because if the fields aren't draining properly, kids aren't going to be able to go out there and play. And so you think, oh, well, you're a professional sports team, so you have the funds to do it. Well, actually, we're not necessarily funding it. We've brought together partners within the community to help do the project. So it's a lot of volunteer time. It's, a landscaping company that brings their staff out there. So it's not always dollars. It's also engaging the community. And then in the end, you have a better result because you have a beautiful field. You have kids that know it's there. You have parents that are seeing it. And I think in our inner city communities, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about parents and they're not coming to the rec leagues with the kids. And I think as a community, we really have to challenge ourselves and say, no, we can engage our parents. If we put something quality out there, if we put a quality program, whether it's in the inner city or in the suburbs out there, parents are going to be attracted to it and be like, you know what, I do want my kid involved in that program. And so we decided to bring youth baseball in internally. And so Matt Cada, who wasn't able here to join us today, would have shared his background with you as well, and some of the other work that we're doing from coaches development training. So we're providing coaches development training for our city rec center coaches. And we're also doing clinics throughout the year where we do those at different points, but bringing in kids from both the inner city and the suburbs together. So
Max, with leveling the playing field, you are at sort of the nexus of engaging communities and engaging different constituencies. How does that process work? And I really do want to dig into this idea of cross constituency collaboration, because everyone in this room is part of a different group, but the way that everyone works in the chain is really important. So how does that?
Yeah, I think that I've seen a lot of great opportunities out there for in-town sports leagues that are available. Whether it's through the school system, I see a lot of schools that are trying to start up athletic opportunities within. They're not going to be traveling; it's just not going to happen. I see a lot of work from the recreation department, but it is really hard for some of these in-town leagues to survive with a lack of resources. And that's why it's so great what the Cleveland Indians do for youth baseball, because I guarantee you those leagues, a lot of them are probably inner-city leagues. They might be, as opposed to some of the youth sports leagues that we see that do all this traveling, they have full-time staff, they're paid, it's a full-time job. A lot of these in-town leagues are basically just parents. They're basically parents who see a need for their kid. They can't afford to play in the private youth soccer league. It's too expensive. Public recreation can't really offer much in terms of athletics because of budget, and you see less and less in the school system. So you see this desperation from a parent or a community leader or whoever it is in that neighborhood who sees this demand and sees a lack of supply. And I think it's going to be up to the public funding, private foundations, the sports teams in these towns to basically take a look in the mirror and realize that it's kind of our responsibility. I think for years you've seen funding go out to stuff like performing arts and literacy and hunger, and you haven't really seen that with youth sports. You don't see a lot of Title I schools, recreation centers, not necessarily your Boys and Girls Club, but that type of after-school program that they need the funding. I mean, it's the playbook is there. It's just the funding that's needed to do it, the resources, the fields, the coaching training, some of this stuff. You talk about traveling to play another team. These guys would love to do that. They would love to travel to Baltimore from DC to play another school in lacrosse, but that's not going to happen. So I think just the awareness and educating funders and resources out there that this is an issue and it needs our help, and it's important for all the reasons that we talked about with college and everything. It just needs more awareness.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up funding. Noah, funding feels like a particularly acute issue for adaptive athletes. How, in your work, where does does funding just take? Is it just the dominant thing, and it's all about generating support from the community? And which are your key constituencies, and who do you work with in the community to make sure that either the funding is there or other resources are there?
So the funding for adaptive athletes is huge. I mean, for me to go ski this year, I paid $22,000 just to attend 5 or 6 races across the country because those were the closest adaptive ski races. And so one of the big things for that cost a lot is equipment, adaptive equipment. Like we have to buy a whole basketball wheelchair, we have to buy modifications for a ski, so I'll be able to ski and all this stuff. And so just equipment is about half of it, and there are foundations out there like the Challenged Athletes Foundation and other foundations out there to help with that, either pay for the whole piece of equipment or just help support and pay like a couple thousand to help with that. But then the real problem with adaptive sports is that it costs a lot of money just to travel to play these sports because there's no leagues close enough to where I'm at to, for me to go play or practice wheelchair basketball, just to practice, 16 hours round trip, all the way to Phoenix, all the way back. I have to spend $200, $300 just for 1 3-hour practice session with a couple other kids. And so really what I push for is because if we can get more leagues in some smaller cities, because there are a whole bunch of adaptive athletes out there, they just don't know it yet. People have misconceptions on who can actually play adaptive sports. I go to tournaments and I go play, and then at the end of the game, half the people stand up out of their wheelchairs, and you don't have to be in a wheelchair to play adaptive sports. It could be knee injuries, anything that allows you not to play stand-up basketball or anything. You can play adaptive basketball. So there's a lot of players out there, and it's just getting more people to come and make small little leagues in town so that traveling to go practice or to even play is reduced significantly.
So is it more about getting local in-town leagues to create adaptive services and support, or is it more about creating adaptive athlete-specific leagues in more places?
I think it's getting a lot more support. Let me see how to phrase this. So, the level of support we have, like from my town, Durango, we get a lot of support because we have a huge ski adaptive program there. It's huge, and the whole town loves it. And so, if we can find more towns and more places where people are willing to kind of, like gyms are willing to give up time in their schedule for adaptive athletes, people are willing to help buy chairs for people just to come and play. In Europe and in Canada, they have able-bodied leagues for people who don't even have disabilities to come play because it's just such a fun sport and it works your whole upper body a lot. And so I think it's just finding communities that are willing to give money and give time to help bring this up as a whole.
You know, you use this phrase that I think is phenomenal, which is just don't know it yet, right? And I think that goes for adaptive athletes, that goes for a lot of kids who want to play, who just don't know it yet, that youth sports is so, you know, to Ryan's point, so beneficial to them. Maybe it's because they don't have access to it, or maybe they don't feel the confidence to want to compete because you're competing with the elite travel athlete in your elementary school who is this probably dovetails with being extremely popular, and you feel intimidated because you're just not the same level of athlete. But participating at any level is so crucial. So as we talk about the different constituencies, there's a lot of different constituencies beyond the kids who just don't know it yet. Parents just don't know it yet. Providers who are searching for a business model just don't know it yet, potentially. And organizers looking for new sources of either youth athletes who are coming in, kids who want to come in and compete, or working within the community. The landscape partner didn't necessarily know it until you brought it to them. So how do we begin to solve the just don't know it yet conundrum for anybody on the panel?
I think we just have to have a really focused message. So I know at the Indians, you know, we went through a strategic planning process where we really had to ask ourselves questions about where we wanted to have our impact. And this is an area that's important to us as an organization. So we know that we want kids out there being physically active, but we also believe in the character development, the perseverance, and all those skills that come out of playing sports. So once you have a really tight message and you go out to the market with that message, people start nodding their heads and they're like, yeah, I see what you mean. And then it's being prepared with what comes after that. So what do you need specifically from that partner or from who you're working with, and being able to make that ask.
Ryan, you're working at both levels, right? You have the sort of Tribeca Film Festival, like high quality documentary, but then you have as much grassroots opportunities to impact that message and that just don't know it yet factor. Talk us through you talked a lot about awareness early on.
Yeah, I think the name Rec League is terrible. I think we should just change it. Recreation, developmentally, I don't know. Recreation sort of, people associate it with, I don't know, frivolity or not being serious, and not that we need to be serious about this, but like it undermines, I think, all the value that you can get out of these sports. So I think like what you said about having a focused message, I totally agree. I think the benefits need to be made clear, and just the name Rec League just feels like it's not doing its job. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but so there's an awareness thing, and I think there's really two different issues. I think there's in suburbs what's happening where you have these elite teams. I live in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is a little bit probably on the edge of being a sports obsessed town. I'm not from there, so I can say this, I guess. But I'll have colleagues and friends who go and travel to, they'll go to Toronto for a hockey tournament, or they'll go to Detroit, or they'll go down here to DC. And I'll ask them, how was your weekend? Like, oh, it's great. I spent 8 hours in the car, I played 3 teams from Pittsburgh and went back home. So there's this thing where everyone's traveling and spending a lot of money and time and doing it. And there's a barrier, I'll have colleagues who take a Friday off work. Not everybody can do that. So there's a barrier to that sort of level for participation in the suburbs. And because of that, rec leagues development leagues, we should start saying that, in the suburbs are less relevant. And then you have what we see all the time in inner cities, where you have a high desire and a high kind of grassroots, I would say, kind of groundswell to make this happen, but the resources aren't there. And so we have a program called Sports Matter, which tries to raise, partners with Donors Choose, which is a crowdfunding platform to raise money for for under-resourced programs. And we see a lot of grassroots sort of activist activity happening in inner cities, but they just can't find the funding. So it's really almost like two very different issues, but at the core, it's still kids don't have access and the opportunity.
Max, you work with directly to solve that problem. What's your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, just going to the travel leagues and not just in suburban America, but also in cities, some of these sports leagues, I don't think you say they don't know it yet. I'm not sure a lot of them realize that, the fact that these have become such intense leagues, the price has gone up so high, I'm not sure that they realize how many kids they're leaving on the sidelines because of those prices. If a kid in suburban DC wants to play soccer, and there's a lot of Latin American families who move to suburban DC and want to play, and they look at all the options out there, they're just like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do for our kid to play? So, I'm not sure how you get the youth sports leagues to provide more scholarships or lower their fees or whatever. You can't get a private sports organization to make less money. It's a hard pitch. But you go to the school system, right? The Title I schools that have no funding for athletics. I think the average is something like $750 for an athletic budget in the country, which is actually higher than what I've seen. For some public schools that don't get the funding, they go to their parents or they charge them, and they go to their donor bases or they get the money. If you talk about a Title I school, they send their kids out on the street to sell candy and donuts, or they do a fundraiser at Chick-fil-A. It's not going to get them lacrosse equipment to offer lacrosse or hockey or baseball. It's maybe a new set of basketball uniforms, or maybe play in a local tournament. The cause is there. The school wants to do it. The principal's bought in. It's just a lack of funding to do it. Same goes for the rec leagues and the youth sports leagues. There's just no resources to do it, and it's going to be up to us bringing awareness to some of the funders out there. Either that, or you get the youth sports leagues to create more opportunities for low-income kids, which I think is a harder way to go. At least in my experience, it has been. But you got people out there who want to do this, and they want to do it the right way. It's just they need the support, and I think that starts with awareness. The amount of times I go into meetings to try to bring awareness to this, and people have no idea that this is going on. Either that, or they don't understand the value of youth sports, is amazing. So it's going to start with education. It's not a short-term process, right, but there's a way of doing it.
Part of it, I think, when we talk about focused messages and raising awareness, on the one hand, there's the parent, right, who needs to understand, like, look, you, by being so myopically focused on the travel team, or this like complete myth that your child is going to end up with a college scholarship, or even college, it's not even that anymore. Now it's college admission. You don't even care about the scholarship. You just want to get them into a good school through sports, which is also largely a myth. I think that a lot of it comes down to the business model, right? And at the either private layer or even on the public layer, how can you create an economic incentive to want to open your platform, whether it's a league or anyone else, up to more kids? And I think it's super challenging. At the professional level, how do you create incentives for the community teams to open up to more kids?
Well, I think there's the quality proposition. So if rec leagues or developmental leagues, if they are wanting to form or wanting to put a quality product in the market, I think the Cleveland Indians are a great partner for them if they see the value, right? And you would think that they would, because we're a professional sports team. But if they see the value in it, then it's our brand on the program, and then there's also the guarantee of the coaches training that the children will be, the coaches that will be receiving, and we'll have the quality. So the quality is there, and I think then it becomes more attractive to the parent. And I think that's part of the challenge too, is there's that question, and there is that, maybe it's a myth or maybe it's not, but just based on what I've seen, and I have two very small children, so I'm just starting out, but there's that issue of what happens, at the soccer fields or, at the baseball fields, and how the kids are being coached. And so I think as a parent, it's apparent to you when you're experiencing it, but at times you might just kind of follow the masses because this is the cultural norm. But if you're presented with another option, then perhaps it's, okay, maybe I want to do that instead. So I think another solution could be champions, and all of us in this room that have children are champions of this cause. So it's us having those conversations with other mothers and fathers about our why. So for me, I'm not having my son start playing baseball until he's 6 because I don't want him to have that bad experience. I want him to have a good experience the first time. So I'm holding off. And so that's something that I communicate as a mom to other mothers. And so I think that we all have a responsibility in this room to be that champion of the cause.
We're going to get to Q&A in about 1 minute. I just wanted to ask Noah, you are a champion. You are a champion for the cause, your own cause. Who are the other champions that you either have worked with and talk about their value, or that you see you acutely need and would like someone to step up?
In adaptive sports, right?
Yes, in adaptive sports.
Okay. So we need a lot of, trying to figure out this question a little bit. It's a little tough.
I mean, is it most? I mean, you mentioned that it's half of it is equipment, and the other half is sort of not even the cost is obviously it all comes down to cost, but a lot of it is travel, and a lot of it is equipment cost. So, does it come down to finding partners within the either equipment makers or with these local leagues? And maybe, whether it's in Cleveland or anywhere else, having the pro sports teams maybe help bolster that, or maybe the college communities, because that's a little bit more diversified.
We've been, we did a lot of research about how we were gonna try to get adaptive sports to start becoming big in a lot of places. And a lot of the ways it looked like we had to go to the school system, like if we can get the schools to back us up and start funding teams and all that stuff with some of their budget, that it would help, because there's the schools know who a lot of the kids are that have probably an amputee or just small disability issues that could play, and it's just it's mainly we're going to try to focus on bringing the schools into this system so that we can kind of schools into the system so we could. Kind of lost my thought, but do you understand?
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely. I think that's where you get that sort of hyper-local cooperation, so that you begin to build these satellites along the way, so that you're not traveling 18 hours in order to find a facility that can actually that you could use. I want to move on to some audience engagement. If you have questions or if you have something to contribute, love to hear it. Keeping in mind that what we really want to do is, if you have a solution that you're proffering that's worked for you, how can you make it universalized so that anyone in this room, no matter what side of the constituency spectrum that they're on, they're able to take something out of it. Please, purple shirt, red shirt, front row.
Thank you. Thanks to the panel. And so George Cunningham from Texas A&M. Is this on?
I can hear you though.
I'll use my.
There you go.
gym
It's on.
voice. There we go. Okay. Thanks. So George Cunningham from Texas A&M, and in Texas, 18% of elementary school students are English language learners. 60% come from households that are economically disadvantaged. So I appreciate, Max, and your comments about Title I schools, where my daughters also attend. And having daughters there, I know that there's choices, books versus physical activity, and meals versus physical activity. So I appreciate the comments in urban settings, and much of the poverty and need in Texas is in urban settings and in rural communities and in 100,000 person cities. And so how do you make the case, or what convincing arguments have y'all made to include physical activity when you have such pressing needs elsewhere?
Yeah, it's funny. Ryan and I were literally just talking about this backstage. It's a really hard pitch to make. It's really hard. I mean, I think you have to kind of explain to someone, kind of tell a story of, hey, look, if you have a kid, first of all, a lot of these schools, as you probably know, their biggest issue is attendance, parent engagement. That's the two things we hear every school we go to. And you have to kind of explain that sports can overcome both of those pretty directly. First of all, if a kid wants to play soccer, basketball, lacrosse, what have you, and his ability to play on the team is based on his attendance in class, his behavior, his performance in the classroom, the school is dying for an incentive for their teachers to get a kid to behave or to attend. Athletics is an incredible way of doing that, something that most people just don't realize. So for there, you have to kind of educate them on, okay, student engagement can be improved by athletics. You may not think about it, but let me explain to you why. Same thing with parent engagement. We talk to schools all the time that can't get a parent to come to parent-teacher conferences, which to me is crazy, but in some of these communities, that's just the reality. And we'll help a school start a soccer team, and all of a sudden at soccer practice or at the game, the parents are lined up on the sidelines. You'd love for the kids to come to school because of wanting to learn math, or you want the parents to come to parent-teacher conference for the right reasons. But if you can get them to the table, and athletics is the way of doing it, I think that's a win. And just some people need to be educated about it. You're not going to win every battle. Some people are not going to understand it, but it's like we talked about. It's just an education process, and it's very frustrating for someone who knows youth sports like we do, and it's natural to us. But first, understand it's not natural for some people to know that, and then try to break down that barrier and explain it. But it's a challenge.
Nice. Someone on, we'll
Right here,
Rob.
you got someone right here.
Sure, absolutely, please.
I'm Bob Luhano with the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, located at Lakeshore Foundation in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm also ambassador for the Laureus Foundation. Question in response to that was asked to Noah in regards to where to find, I guess, places for adaptive opportunities. I was president for the USQRA Wheelchair Rugby, and probably your YMCA's are a good area to try to find those opportunities to bring adaptive sport. You also follow up in regards to schools. Definitely, that's really the next step. That's really where we need to have adaptive opportunities. And there's actually an organization that was founded here, Athletics for All. Go to athleticsforall.org, and it definitely has resources to approach school systems in order to assist people that wanted to start adaptive programs. So just a couple of resources. So thank you.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you for the contribution. Please, back there. Yep, that's you.
Hi, my name's Nyla. I am the executive director of Be More Kids, which is a youth rec league in Baltimore. And you guys spoke very eloquently about how kids benefit from having these in-town leagues. And I think, Rebecca, you alluded a little bit to this when you talked about bringing the community together to construct the league. In your experience, or maybe can you talk a little bit more about the impact that these leagues can have on the community? Because that might be more of a selling point into getting somebody to champion that.
No, that's great. So I know I talked a little bit about the character development piece, but it can be the activity itself can be a community builder. So I'll give you an example. So this summer we're actually going to be offering a summer camp in the Huff neighborhood, which is historically been a pretty tough neighborhood in Cleveland, but there have been a lot of activities that have taken place over the last 10 years to really try to revitalize it. And one of those activities was resurrecting historic league park. So any of you that are baseball fans will know that a lot of players, famous players, played there, including Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio. But it's located in a neighborhood that's predominantly African American, and it's a beautiful turf field, but there's this question about, okay, this is great, it's here, and we have travel teams that are coming in and utilizing the space now, but how do we as a community get our local kids playing on this field this summer? So we started out pretty small and had some grassroots conversations and did the right, it's really about relationship building. So even when you were talking before about working with the schools and kind of meeting people that are working in the community already where they're at and understanding what their challenges are and just taking the time. And it does take time, so it doesn't happen overnight. But you have to take that time and really spend time with people and understanding what their issues are. And then they'll start bringing more people to the party, and that there's a lot of value to that. And so with this program in particular, we started working with a Catholic Charities center that's located there. But the executive director, she's brilliant, and she thought of including others in the community, which is a really smart move because, she recognized that she has a valuable program, but there's other groups within that neighborhood that also have valuable programs. So bringing them to the table. So we're really excited about it. But I guess in terms of success, we'll probably know after we run it this year. But I think it's those success stories and be able to capture those, whether that's like in your newsletter or at any board meeting that you might have, like maybe starting out every meeting with a success story and highlighting it, or having a kid come in and talk about how it's impacted them, like having that rec league in their community has made a real difference in their life. And it just kind of like sets the tone for the rest of the meeting. And really helps people understand like why they're there and what they're doing every day to try to continue to, chip it away a little bit.
That goes back to your original message around awareness, and that we've heard come up a bunch of times on the panel. That ends up becoming a huge lever that no matter what your constituency is, whether you're a parent talking to another parent, or you're in the community, or you run a business, that becomes getting more awareness, but also sort of distributing it and raising it. It ends up becoming a huge piece of this in terms of getting more buy-in, creating more champions. Yes, please, in the back.
Hi, I'm Bethany Henderson. I'm Executive Director of DC Scores. And one of the things that I have not really heard on this panel, though I've heard it talked around, is the role of community-based organizations like Scores that already run leagues and are trusted in the community. We actually have a partnership with our local pro team, DC United, Soccer's our sport, and with DC DPR that's here today, and that's allowing us to actually serve thousands of children with local sports leagues, and it brings all of the benefits you just spoke about from the local community, trusted on the ground, our coaches, our teachers in schools, and I think that this is a model. Scores is in 14 cities, but I think that this type of model, having a trusted community-based organization as the local league operator, really can generate a lot of the positive effects you're talking about.
No, absolutely, and forgive me for not mentioning ours. So we work with the Cleveland Baseball Federation, so within the youth baseball space. They've been in Cleveland for over 100 years, so I can't take credit for that. So they do a tremendous job, and I would agree with you. I think the community organizations are really at the forefront and are really the heartbeat of what can happen. So I agree with that.
And especially as you talk about coming out and reaching out to the local pro sports teams that lend a lot of that credibility or authority, that's when you come in with a established organization that has a plan, I think that leads to success. Yeah, please, back on by the window.
So Jennifer Smith again. A couple times, last panel and this panel, we've heard that idea about the desire for the college scholarship as the reason for parents running out of town, jumping into travel leagues, all that great stuff. I have long hoped for an economic model, just a one-pager that I could show parents that says, if you took all that money and you put it into a 529K at the age of 6, this is what you would have versus what you're going to get even if they break into college. Is there anything out there like that? Have you guys seen anything like that? Do we have an economist in the room who could put one together?
I haven't, but if you are getting your PhD and you want an amazing project that's going to get a ton of publicity and get a ton of backing from a lot of different people, you should.
It is so needed.
Go approach Jennifer and figure out how to build that out. That is a phenomenal idea, and that strikes me as the kind of thing that would get an enormous amount of traction, especially as we talk about message.
Thank you.
Sure. Love that idea.
Hi, Lisa Delpy from George Washington University, and we actually are working on that. But the big thing that you have to realize is that a lot of parents don't really want to see that because they take pride and they really enjoy their kids participating. And it's really more of a psychological thing for the parents. And I think that's more of a factor than economics or getting into schools. It's a lot of times it's just the parents like that competition and that social community they have. So you need to look at that as well.
Yeah, it's one of the things about, and I don't mean to say it's about rebranding rec leagues entirely, although that part of it is the name, but understanding and communicating to parents that you will have, it is competitive and in the right ways, and it is social in the right ways, and that's something that the parent needs to sort of get over, that their own child's athletic exceptionalism isn't necessarily a realistic or productive goal when you're a parent. We probably have time for one more question. If you keep the comment very, very brief, please.
I'm Mike McMahon from the Sylvania Recreation District and just outside Toledo, Ohio, and a lot of talk about what we can do. We may be an anomaly, but right now we've got about 1,200 kids that are just getting ready to start their rec baseball season. It's like rec baseball. They're finishing up their rec soccer, about 800 kids right now, so it can be done. And the two things that I've found that are just essential to continuing to build on these rec leagues is a consistent message coming from the leadership within a town, making sure that it's ongoing. It's not changing from director to director or leader to leader. And number two is prioritizing these kids. There's no shortage of travel teams in our area, but we've made it a point to prioritize and give these rec leagues the best fields, the top time to play their games, the quality facilities that we can. So those are the two things that I think have allowed us to continue doing this for 20, 25 years since our organization's been in place.
And this is exciting because if you want to hear more from Mike, he will be leading the continuing conversation about this topic that will be happening not immediately following this panel, but following the First Lady after 1 o'clock, I believe. Mike, do you know what room that's in? 702. 702. Mike McMahon, hopefully some of the other panelists, and hopefully a lot of you, we can sit and keep talking about this really, really important topic. In the meantime, our time is up. Thank you so much to the panelists and for their insights, and thank you to you for your attention and enthusiasm.
Hi, it's me again. We're going to take about a 10